So we have our official Tuesday Tea Time welcoming. I'm glad we're here together, as always. I will mute you, and we will do some sitting. Let's let ourselves find a comfortable position that works for us, whatever that is. You can stay seating or lying down, looking at the camera on Zoom or not. Maybe just being within the sound of my voice is helpful, or so that you can hear the bell. Sometimes it gets tiresome being close to computer screens. So I will ring and we will have the sound of the bell, gathering us together again in that centuries old process of being with our hearts and minds, and having the ability to hear the teachings of the Buddha, to experience them directly from the simple yet not easy instructions for being in the present moment. That handful of leaves, so many leaves in the forest, but he taught the small handful of leaves basic ways of getting to freedom, which basically implies understanding that suffering occurs. Suffering is here in this human realm. We can't escape it, but we can have a way of not identifying with it. And so in honoring of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we take refuge in the understanding that freedom is possible in this lifetime, and that we have the practices of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the ability to watch our hearts and minds, thanks to the Buddha being willing to teach after being asked a few times, or it being suggested by one of the Deva angelic spirits saying, please teach. And also to the Sangha, great appreciation to each other in our Sangha. And to all of those who have gone before us, passing along the Buddha's teachings and the instructions for us to continue doing what we're going to do right here. Sit quietly, letting the eyes close gently, or keeping the eyes open sometimes is helpful. If you feel sleepy, you can open your eyes and let light in. Or notice as sleepiness comes upon us that it can be pleasant, a pleasant sensation. We can actually investigate a little more around the sleepiness before it overtakes us. And we can wake up from it as well in the moment of noticing pleasant or unpleasant. And whether your eyes are open slightly or closed, we let our bodies settle in the position where we are, beginning to quiet the body, calm the mind. Which happens in its own time and of its own accord, but with mindfulness being present, we have the opportunity to be able to notice without attachment what it is that arises in our bodies, that arises in our hearts and minds. It can help sometimes if we set an intention of possibly sitting still for most of the sitting, or maybe having kindness for ourselves, having compassion for ourselves, or beginning again when we notice that we're lost in some kind of thought process or body ache or pain and our mind gets carried away. We can make an aspiration to begin again, to wake up whenever we can and begin again at a point of our breath at the nostrils, or maybe we choose feeling the breath rising and falling at the diaphragm. We can also choose a place that's a touch point, where our buttock sits on the cushion, where our hands touch, maybe our feet on the floor, so that we can go back to that point when we find ourselves lost in delusion, basically, not knowing exactly what's happening, kindly just bringing ourselves back to this very moment and maybe that single object of attention that we choose. Holding ourselves in ease and well-being, kindly. Not a lot of striving, but just enough effort to be interested in what's happening right now. What's rising? What are we aware of? Without a long analytical process about it, but just, can we know clearly what's happening in this present moment? What sensation is arising at the breath or the touch point, or what sensation might be showing itself to us in our body awareness? And can we know it with clarity and awareness? And do we notice if we attach to it and have a storyline? Maybe we can let that storyline go and just be present with the actual knowing of what is present, what is arising. If our energy wanes or our mind wanders or our body gives us extra sensation and reminders of its presence, we can wake right up in that very moment, being aware of what's happening. We can sometimes see how quickly the mind comes in to make up a story or judge something that's arising. But with mindfulness being present and awareness being there, we can quickly see that we can let go of that. One of those aspects of right intention, right thought, of the generosity of renunciation, the generosity of letting go of what doesn't really serve to pay attention to, and inclining our hearts and minds toward kindness for ourselves, being aware of what's happening in this very moment as best we can, in the body or at the touch points of the body, returning to that single object to help with concentration and perhaps notice the impermanent nature of whatever comes to our hearts and minds, or if we're exploring something in the body with some attention, we might not notice when that sensation began, but we can wake up in that knowing of the sensation, and we might notice that soon enough sensations change, or our attention goes to some other part of the body or to some other place in the mind. It flitters about from place to place. And the practice of mindfulness and awareness brings us a little space between getting absorbed in those moment-to-moment experiences and seeing them clearly as impermanent, non-personal. We have to touch sometimes these places of suffering, but we can also step back a little, let go of what doesn't serve us, and hold ourselves in compassion, in kindness, that we may be free of challenges or free of suffering. May we have ease. May we have well-being, holding ourselves in that regard. Reminding ourselves, breathing in, I know I am breathing in, present with the breath. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. Maybe we notice breathing in that it's a short breath or a long breath, a warm breath or a cool breath. It can come back here to this point when we find ourselves lost in thought and roaming without judgment, just returning or waking up in that precise moment that we become more aware, which can actually bring joy that we are waking up in this moment. As we sit and pay attention and let mindfulness and awareness be present, we can pretty readily see how quickly things change. Pleasant could become unpleasant, unpleasant could reverse to pleasant sensations. We can see the nature of changing objects. We can see what happens with clinging. When we hang on to something as being pleasant or push away something as being unpleasant, we can notice the mind going through so many various emotions. Reminding ourselves of associating with unpleasant as suffering and separating from pleasant is suffering, and not getting what we want is suffering, and having what we don't want is suffering. So we're all familiar with these experiences, but in our exploration of right view, that first noble path, we can be reminded in our practice of inclining in the heart and mind toward right view and letting go of wrong view. Letting go of clinging to this permanent sense of self that we've built up. And we can see that right here in this moment, as we see that there's nothing to hang on to that doesn't change. And even in this obvious truth of change, we can really see the habit of clinging is so strong. We can see that what feeds it and nourishes it is this habit of grasping. Seeing things in some kind of personality view. And we can joyously awaken sometimes to this delusion of what strengthens wrong view. And so we want to see what arises, to see whether it serves and maybe enhances the right view of non-self. And we know that a great deal of patience and perseverance is required to integrate this into our understanding, seeing the changing nature of these aggregates that make up these parts of this being, seeing that they also cannot be clung to. We simply investigate what is predominant. See that it's impermanent and has no solid place to land. Breathing in, breathing out, attending to the present moment with gladness in our hearts, waking up in each moment, being aware in each moment. Seeing clearly, not buying into what is impermanent and thinking that it's permanent. Continuing to incline our heart and mind toward kindness for ourselves as we unearth whatever is seen clearly, allowing compassion to arise. Being present with our suffering when we see it, without being attached to it as best we can. Not claiming things as being I or mine. Even the beautiful, we don't often perceive its decaying nature. Inclining the mind toward those thoughts of non-harming, that second noble truth of renunciation and loving kindness and compassion as the three kinds of thought. Letting this wise restraint be acknowledged when we let something go. Settling back without lunging forward. We can see what arises and passes away without the compulsion possibly to act on them. It's a gradual process, letting go of habit patterns, embracing patience, one of the practices that Sayadaw U Tejaniya suggests with regard to thoughts and desires is asking the question, is this necessary? Is this helpful? Sometimes it isn't, and we can practice letting go. I don't need to do this. I don't need to carry on with this thought. Wisdom is present in our practice. encouraging those thoughts that lead to our own well-being and the well-being of others, that of loving kindness or goodwill, thoughts free of ill will. Those can be pretty subtle, especially in regards to ourself. When we notice something arising that perhaps is harmful for us, we don't need to repeat thinking about it. We can let ourselves be an important human being to ourselves. Letting metta practice be part of our life on a regular basis. Taking a few moments to hold ourselves in this kindness, in this well-being. Using whatever words or feeling comes to you. May I be happy and peaceful. These moments of metta are like pure gold. Letting this goodwill soften us, soften our minds and our hearts to become more smooth and gentle, more pliable, helping us lessen our reactive judgments and internal comments about ourselves as well as others. It can nourish patience and caring with difficulties and disturbances in the heart and mind. May I have ease in my life. Or the simple phrase of, may I be peaceful. May I be at ease with whatever's happening. May I be at ease even with this, when some difficulty arises in the heart and mind. Holding ourselves in that kindness. May I be at ease. And as metta grows stronger and steadier, we can feel more tolerant of ourselves and of others, a little less judgmental. Gradually, we can start to live in a growing field of goodwill and good humor, and holding ourselves and others with a lighter heart. May I have ease and well-being. And may others have ease and well-being. Whether there's a certain person that comes to mind as a teacher, a benefactor, a friend. Maybe it's a different kind of being, an animal, an insect. May we notice if we get lost in aversion, that we can practice changing the channel. This metta channel is always available. We just need to tap into it. As we see the good in ourselves and the good in others. And touching upon that third right intention of compassion in right thought. This ability to nurture compassion for ourselves when things are difficult, and for others, those close to us and those unknown. This compassion can be the antidote to great destructive powers. It opens our hearts to the suffering that is there of others and ourselves. Awakening that compassion in ourselves out of our willingness to come close to suffering. And using equanimity to help us come close. To help us not be so defended, indifferent, or apathetic in the face of some people's suffering. Just being with our mind when we approach a situation of suffering. Do we notice emotional distress or fear or pain in the body? We can just keep this field open and wide and touch upon our own suffering, other people's suffering. letting mindfulness be present. We have both openness and equanimity. Just a little bit at a time, learning to let things in without drowning in the difficulties or without being overcome by the sorrow. Just being with the truth of the way things are, with that strong foundation of loving kindness. May we wish in gladness and safety that all beings be free from harm, safe and protected, have ease in their lives. Knowing that this field of compassion is limitless. This ability to touch into loving kindness can be continual. It's always there. And so with gladness, we wish that all beings everywhere be free from suffering, free from danger, have ease in their lives. Anicca vata sankhara upadavaya domino upakitawa meruchanti te samvapasamo sukho. All conditioned things are subject to impermanence. They arise and pass away. And seeing this clearly with mindfulness brings the greatest happiness, which is peace. And may the goodness of our practice benefit all sentient beings. Thank you so much for your practice. Brings me joy and mudita, and I hope it brings you that joy too.